Hi guys, before today's episode, we wanted to jump in and talk to you guys about a couple of things. Number one, this is the last show of the year 2025, and we just wanted to thank you for following along and supporting the show. That support, that reaching out to us, the comments, the likes, the subscriptions, all that means a ton to us, and it really makes the work of doing this podcast worth it. Next, if you remember back to episode 204, we did a podcast all about the 22 Creedmoor. And inside that podcast, we announced a 204 Ruger giveaway. We partnered up with our friends at Ruger to give away a rifle. We're happy to announce the winner of that rifle is Brenton Reese. Now, Ruger has reached out to him to get the rifle squared away. We've already sent him a case of ammo and some other goodies. Now, we're not Santa Claus, but we're delivering for him this Christmas. Now, if you want to see more of those giveaways, you got to interact with us. Like, comment, and subscribe, and email us, podcast@hornady.com. Now enjoy the show.
I'm Joyce Hornady. You might say accuracy is my business. I make bullets.
You are listening to the Hornady Podcast.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. This is the Hornady Podcast, and I'm your host, Seth Swerczek. Today, we've got a full table for you. We've got Preston from engineering to my left.
Or marketing.
Preston from marketing. The engineers are across the table. Yeah. Miles and Jayden. Guys, thanks for coming on the show.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Welcome to engineering, Preston.
No, I'll just stay in marketing.
Yeah. Well, you do marketing well. And
I don't know about that, but hopefully people enjoy this podcast.
You do marketing.
I do it.
Yeah.
Professionally.
I guess you're right.
Super profesh. Guys, this podcast
is already devolved.
But no, what we want to talk about is something that has been a big listener request going way back to our very first Hornady rifle builds, where we outlined one Jayden Quinlan's 7mm PRC hunting rifle. Awesome rifle. Took your giant elk in Colorado with it. You reluctantly had to build the rifle because I got you a barrel.
Yeah.
Even though you weren't going to build one until I presented him with the barrel at bended knee, raised it up.
I thought you knighted him.
Yeah. Drink the 7 PRC Kool-Aid. Anyways, you built the rifle. It was awesome. Go check that episode out if you haven't seen it. But in that episode, you had a dope card tethered to your scope mount that we very briefly touched on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the listener, as it turns out, they wanted to see that. The viewer wanted to see more of it. Okay. And so, we put that away as, we need to do that episode. Fast forward like a full calendar year, we're finally getting to it. Finally.
Has it been a year?
I don't know. I made that up.
Feels like it.
Yeah, it's a true fact I just made up for this show. But it's been a while.
We could hold it until it's been a year and then release it that Thursday.
Miles, we won't be doing that. So for the listener that wanted to
we might need this.
that got the teaser, or the listener that just wants to see how we at Hornady, because we'll go through all of ours, because the way we manage our data on a hunt is different, probably a little bit from person to person. Now, that's what I want the listener to be clear on. This is not competition stuff. There might be some crossover for NRL Hunter, certainly not really for PRS. But what this podcast is specific to is how we, and then more specifically how Jayden, manages ballistic data while he's on the hunt. Because that's something that's really important if you are hunting, to the capabilities of your firearm, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're taking a shot where bullet drop, altitude, wind, all those things come into play, you do not do that haphazardly. You want to have every bit of information that you possibly can to make the very best shot on target. So with that, the long intro, with the quick, devolving into engineering and such, let's get started on managing data while you're on the hunt. And what you guys feel is important, because it's not just like a one-and-done solution. I think all of us will have a secondary and a tertiary way to get data. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to kick it over to Jayden to talk, and Miles to talk at a high level, why that's important and some ways of doing it, and then we'll get into the weeds of doing it. I'm going to start it off with something Miles said right before recording. Right before you hit record, he said it. He said, well, one way you can manage ballistics on a hunt is to manage the range where ballistics don't really matter. And that is certainly a big takeaway. Compound that with the podcast we released not long ago, Max Point Blank Range. So with that, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of step one is,
You got the fancy card. You go first.
well, we'll get to that. You want a higher level
Yeah, just
discussion, a 30,000-foot view over managing data first?
yeah, and some ways to do that. Kestrel, max point blank range, forward off on your phone, hard cards, solvers within a binocular, etc. are some ways, but the big one right out of the gate, manage the range, and then how you zero your rifle matters. We talked about max point blank range.
Yeah, and we kind of covered it in that episode, but like your hybrid zero angle, basically where you zero the rifle for max point blank range, and then you have your zero angle taken into effect, to handle stuff. Generally, my takeaway on it, and I've never shot big game past I think like 340 yards. That's the far I've got a deer that like 320, and then an oddad at 340. So my general thought is most of the time you can get closer, and I'm also much more willing than most hunters I weigh my convenience very highly. So if the shot opportunity isn't there and it's going to require me to like break myself to get to where the animal is, I'll just find another one.
Yeah, you really judge your steps taken to shots fired levels.
Yeah. The closer you shoot them to the road, not on the road and not from the road necessarily, but that's less work for you.
Yeah.
But unless you got to drag them and quarter them out and whatever. So I don't know. Maybe that doesn't resonate with everybody, or maybe it resonates with more people than I think. But
Maybe.
Generally, my thought has always been if you're within the max point blank range, then you take the shot and you don't have to worry about it. And if they're farther than that, you generally have time. Yeah. And so I just have my forward off on my phone and range them and get if it's 500-600 yards, something like that, then I'll range them. But I also know in the back of my head that if I zero at 100, it's a half mil to 200. It's 1.1-ish to 3 and about 2 mils to 400 yards. And so anywhere in between there, I kind of can
you can make
split the difference.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that max point blank range for the listener, jump over to that podcast if you haven't already, because what we kind of culminated that podcast with was a modified version of max point blank range where, we discussed in great detail how we seem to sometimes get wrapped around our own axle on huge sample sizes and setting up a zero angle and forward off, etc. Well, you can still do those things, and then it's really an odd dichotomy, but you can juxtapose that with a max point blank range, which is a much simpler and old school way of doing things, but your point of aim does not have to match your point of impact. You can have your point of impact be, say, 1 or 2 inches higher, or 0.2 of a mil higher than your point of aim, and that creates sort of a max point blank range approach that you can still do your zero angle, so your forward off in your phone on your supercomputer is really, really dialed in, but then for anything inside of 300, you basically just let them have it on the shoulder.
Yeah.
And that's a really unique way of doing it that I think is really practical.
You get the benefits of both sides of the coin.
Yep. And I think an important point that you brought up is if it's past that, where you do need to make a really good calculation, one of the biggest things is the time aspect. If you don't have the time to do it right, one would argue you shouldn't do that thing if you don't have the time to do it correctly.
And as you get past 350, 400 yards, getting a good feel for wind deflection is critical, right? It starts becoming like the primary driving factor of a miss.
Yep.
And that takes time. That takes scanning trees, brush, whatever you have, to try to get a feel for what the wind is doing where you are and downrange. Because if you just completely neglect it, it starts being like you miss entire animals with wind deflection if you don't account for it.
And then make really, really bad shots.
I was going to say, when you have an animal facing a certain direction based on wherever the wind's blowing, there's ways you could manipulate the wind call to this is a 10 ring or this is not on the animal. But if the animal was flipped 180 degrees,
right,
it's a 10 ring or a gut shot. And that's a problem.
Yeah. And then that's the other thing is the farther away you get when you make those less than ideal shots that actually hit the animal, you're that much further away to get to the point where you're starting to do a track, and then the animal is
obviously moving.
traveling further because the shot has less effect the further you go.
Right on.
Hornady Security Mobilist Safes. Discover the ultimate solution for safeguarding your valuable equipment with Hornady Security Mobilist Safes. Offering an innovative modular design, Mobilist safes can be easily transported and assembled piece by piece in any room. Featuring a full square lock interior organizing system that maximizes storage space with countless storage configurations. Elevate your security with Mobilist safes from Hornady Security.
Jayden, what do you think on some higher level stuff, and what are the ways specifically, what are the methods that you use for managing your data on the hunt?
Yeah, I would say what Miles talked about is absolutely true, and probably for the majority of people that I've hunted with or talked to that are hunters or whatever, that more simplistic approach of not having as many things to manage is kind of the tact there.
Mm-hmm.
I take a completely different approach. I have a bunch of different stuff to manage and a bunch of different layers, but that's all based on experience. I mean, I've had hunts where the only shot I was presented with was quite a long ways away and I couldn't get closer and I didn't have more time and all of that,
Yeah, you had time to make a good wind call because that was a perfect shot. You're talking about the 300 Win Mag in the Colorado elk?
Yeah. So that was, I won't condone anybody shooting an animal at any distance. That's for you to define. But that was nearly 800 yards, and you couldn't get closer. It was the last day of season. It was the last 10 minutes of shooting light. The conditions were good. The system was proven and tested and capable at those distances. And you definitely need ballistics data to make that shot happen.
Right.
So with experiences like that, I guess my tact is kind of multi-tiered, where I definitely have Fort Off on my phone, like you were saying, and generally I kind of draw my line around 400-ish yards. I'll look at the actual data to define that line better, but out to 400, it's kind of a blend between what Miles is talking about with like an optimized zero setup to have max point blank range forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
As well as just some memorization of that early bullet flight path.
Yeah, because they're very similar early on.
They're
from
very
cartridge to cartridge.
Yeah, they're very similar, and I'm not going to say they're condition independent, but more so, right? So if it's a really hot afternoon and all my ballistics are based on cold mornings, right, out to 400, that discrepancy in the conditions that the bullet is going to experience versus what I, researched or memorized or whatever isn't as big of a deal. But when you go past 400, or let's say around 0.4 to 0.5 seconds time of flight, that's where you really have to start accounting for everything. So my kind of plan is if it's within 400, I can take the shot split second because I've optimized my zero condition that way, and then I just kind of know what it is at 300, what it is at 400, and can make a quick call.
Or you like you said, you optimize your zero. Another thing we talked about, very similar. If you want to run the 100-yard zero, run the 100-yard zero, but you can dope the gun for 250 or 275,
right,
and know that you're going to be good out
way.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. But when it comes to anything beyond that, that's where the multiple different levels I'll talk about come into play. So one is Fort Off on the phone. That's so of the electronic methods, I typically have Fort Off on the phone. I have a screenshot of my range card saved as the background on my phone. So maybe it's 400, 500, 600 that the shot location is going to take place in, and it needs to happen really quickly for whatever reason. That one might be just wake the phone up, see the background as the drop card, get your solution, and go. If you have more time than that, enter the phone, go into Fort Off, manipulate any changes you need to for conditions or whatever it is. But phones suck because batteries die super easy. They're not very robust. They're not water impervious, all of those sort of things. So you kind of have to protect them and manage them more. So the Kestrel is a better backup for that. Battery life's long, it's rugged. So I will have a Kestrel on me, but that's essentially only going to be the go-to if I need to update environmental conditions because there's been a dramatic change that I didn't account for. The wind conditions are so difficult to judge that using the impeller on the Kestrel would be beneficial to take the time to do that. Or the phone's a no-go, right?
Yep.
The phone's dead.
Yeah. Or actively raining. That might be a good time to jump to a Kestrel.
Sure, yeah. Exactly. And the reason why I leave the Kestrel to that kind of back burner is just because it takes you longer to get to a given solution as far as scrolling to a range or whatever that may be. And obviously,
inconvenient.
Yeah, I mean, you can Bluetooth them with like the Vectronics units and stuff like that, so that when you range the animal, it immediately updates it for you in the Kestrel. So there's workarounds to that for sure. And then the final layer is the drop card stuff that I guess the users were interested in seeing on the rifle. So that and I think we'll put this on the screen, Preston.
Yep.
But
before we dive into your range card,
okay,
I want to hear from Preston. We've talked a lot about what they kind of do. You might have some differing opinions. I want to hear what Preston does before we get into the weeds on this drop card.
Yeah, and mine might be very similar to yours, so I'm also interested to hear yours. But number one is I have a set of binoculars with a BC base calculator in them. I've used actually 3 of them to this point, and there's more out there than that, I'm pretty sure. But I will get my forward off profile fiddle string tight, get it right. At that point, if you just enter in all your stuff to a BC based calculator, it's going to get a different result than what the forward off gives me.
And forward off is the gospel, so that's correct.
Right. So I will actually go in and tweak either BC or muzzle velocity or zero range, because you can do all those things to make
lie to it.
You can lie to it to make it line up with a no wind condition on the forward off profile, and I'll do that at multiple ranges, probably like 4, 8, and 1,000 yards, and make that all line up. And that's pretty much the gospel for me out to 4 to 5, maybe 600 yards if the wind is super calm, right?
Yep.
Like we talked about, as soon as the wind becomes a factor, I'm pulling the phone out. I do have a Kestrel on the side, but I pretty much just use that for atmospherics. I feel like my phone is super robust.
It is the most robust
compared to Jayden's, evidently. So I put a lot of faith in it.
There's been several years of complaints with Jayden's phone and how robust it is.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of weak.
Okay.
Doesn't get signal in or out very well.
How convenient.
I'll fight more than one of you at the same time.
But anyway, I have ran Jayden's dope card before in certain scenarios. Actually made a little bit of a dope card on the elk hunt this year.
Yeah.
So I probably have a number one plan, a secondary plan, and a tertiary plan.
Yeah. Well, that's convenient because ours are in great alignment. I set up forward off with that modified max point blank range. I'm usually somewhere 2 to 3/10 of a mil high at 100 yards. Then I'll set my zero angle for that. So the forward off, I'll true that up to make sure it is absolutely perfect. And then I'll take a screenshot, like Jayden said. I'll go through and screenshot and run a table every 50 yards. And then I'll screen grab only, say, 250 to 450. Or that'll be, I'll try to get that centered because I really don't care about out to 250. And I really don't care about anything past 450 because if it's before 250, I'm just going to shoot it. If it's after 450, I'm not going to use just that dope card. I'm gonna get a something like my phone, for example. So I have the screenshot. Forward off is always my go-to. If it's an extended range shot, I'm pulling out the phone. I'm going to the forward off. That's no questions asked. I do run binoculars that have a G7 base solver, and that is super convenient. Like you said, there are limitations to BC, which we've talked about. There are huge limitations to BC solvers, and when you start adding shots with inclination, high winds, variable temperatures, it can just continue to wreak havoc. So I'll do my best to make the binoculars match forward off, and I won't trust those, past maybe 600 yards. If for whatever reason it had to be further than that, I would get out the phone. So for me, that's a big one. I do have a printed dope card as well somewhere. I usually don't hunt with a buttstock pack, but if I do, it'll be in that zippered compartment. Otherwise, it'll be in the back of my binocular case. So I'll have a physical card with me as well. And then the very last thing that I've actually never used on a hunt is a Kestrel. And that is not in my bino hunters. That is buried in the pack. I know exactly where it's at. It's got a little home in my pack, but I've never used that on a hunt outside of, I'm up here glassing. Why don't I watch the wind for a while? But as far as using it for data, it's never happened on a hunt because of the inconvenience. But I do carry one because it is forward off, so it is set up with the right solution. Just the manipulation of the unit itself.
We should probably mention that all of us started using forward off on our phone.
Yeah, so
for us to
nature.
go to Kestrel,
yeah,
it's still a challenge for me to use it.
Yeah, I get questions
honestly.
about, hey, you have to forward off Kestrel. How do I do this, that, and the other thing? And it's like, I don't know. I should know, but I don't. I do want to touch briefly on my hard dope card. Nothing like what Jayden's about to get into right now.
Yeah, my last one wasn't either.
No, it is not. It's every 100 yards to 300, every 50 yards to 500, every 25 yards out to like 650 with an average environmental condition and a 90-degree 5-mile-an-hour wind. It's very, very simple. And again, if I have to use it on the outer edges of 500-600 yards, something wrong happened. I'm definitely not. I'm definitely going to the phone.
That's my kind of approach for integral hunter, I guess. And I guess I would do something similar for big game hunting if I ever did it. But I'll do every 50 yards basically on a card with a 10-mile-an-hour left to right, and then I flip the card over with a 10-mile-an-hour right to left. Because it does aerodynamic jump and whatever else. But yeah, I'll use forward off to generate those outputs. And then if the wind is less or there is no wind, you just kind of have to look at everything and make a judgment call where if things should shift up or down or left or right or how much.
Yep. And shameless plug for the new Hornady bino case. Check it out. Hornady.com if you haven't seen it.
It's actually a legit bino case.
It's awesome. But I'll have my Kestrel in the side pouch. And then that dope card I made this year, I only made it for the elk hunt, and that was that 30-30. So it was a very simple dope card.
Short.
Small. But I had 3 columns actually later on for total come up because of that aerodynamic jump.
Okay.
And then I laminated it, hole punched it, paracordered it to the zipper for that front pocket. So it was never going to ever
Where are you going?
fall out. Nowhere.
Exactly. So
not unless a 551-pound gorilla was hanging on it.
There's no better time to stock your reloading bench and light up your range with Hornady Get Loaded Plus. New this year, free bullets or free cases when you buy these select Hornady reloading tools. Plus, receive the free HIT Target Impact Indicator. Hornady Get Loaded Plus. Free bullets, free cases, free HIT Target Impact Indicator. Get loaded and light it up with Hornady Get Loaded Plus. Limitations apply. Visit Hornady.com/GetLoaded2025 for further details.
So we're going to jump into Jayden's card now, give the listener what they want. But suffice it to say, in summary of the first 20 minutes of this podcast, do not do the disservice to yourself by going out into the field with a capable rifle system, with good quality ammo, and not have multiple ways to get good data for your rifle if you intend on having to put dope on the gun. I think that's a very good takeaway. And if you're only doing 1 or 2 of those things, maybe think about throwing in a third or a fourth option. I've seen people take their hat and then Sharpie drop on the bill of their hat. I've seen that happen.
Nothing wrong with that.
No. So, Jayden, with that, let's dive in. This is advanced. None of us have doctorate level degrees in anything, but just a quick looking at this, it looks intimidating, but I'm confident you have a way to manage this so it's not quite so.
Yeah, the whole purpose of this thing is to make the range card or dope card concept easier to use.
Well, and it's better too. That when you look at it, and the listener will see this or the viewer will see it, it looks intimidating, but this is better than, say, my dope card. This gives you much more reliable solutions as you start to extend the range.
Yeah. So this comes from years and years of use of this is pre-phone, pre-Kestrel stuff where all you had to work with was go on the internet or
JBM.
Sometimes there was, software on your computer that you could get a CD of or download stuff like the old
compact disc,
the old quick target stuff.
Sorry to interject. You mentioned supercomputer on our phones.
Yeah.
And I just got to thinking of elementary school when we had those big floppy discs
Yeah.
that
yeah.
we played.
3.5-inch floppy, man.
No, bigger
bigger
than that.
than
The
that.
bigger
Oh.
one
The
that we
5-inch.
played Oregon
Oh
Trail
yeah,
on.
the actual flexible ones.
And then like
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
a supercomputer, and we used to have to blow on the Nintendo cartridges, and they might work sometimes.
Yeah.
We've come a long ways.
Well, walk us
Okay,
through
so
this
the-
dope card.
So
here,
the goal is, or the problem would be, you have your printed out dope card, and everybody's probably done it, right? You got range and drop and wind and spin drift and aerodynamic jump, or yada yada yada, whatever you have on that card, and it looks really good on paper, and you're like, oh yeah, if I want my 350-yard shot, I just go here and do this, and then when you are under stress because you're hunting and this is your only opportunity, and it's a big bull elk or whatever it is, right? You got buck fever. Finding that 350-yard solution on that very symmetrical table becomes like the most challenging thing in the world, you know?
Mhm.
And so, and same thing in the competition world. So this is the same thing I use for NRL Hunter, because it's the same story, right? The timer goes off and your ability to maintain calm just flies out the window.
Not for Preston.
Obviously not.
Well,
not with a
well, for
mustache
me.
like that.
Not for Miles.
That's a mustache of stability.
You
Anyway,
could have one too.
yeah.
Possibly you.
Okay, so I guess if we put this on the screen, I'll just go from the top to the bottom of the card.
Yeah.
So at the top.
Talk as if I know what I'm doing, and it'll be up there when it needs to be up there.
Okay.
Okay.
So at the top of the card, you kind of have some darker outlined blocks, the top two, and this is where the conditions that the card was ran are recorded. So the temperature, the pressure, relative humidity, and the wind mile an hour. And then over on the right, you'll see DA. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit.
Because that's kind of a, I don't know, that can be really useful for practical application, and it can also give you some bad results at extended range.
That's right.
Yep.
It's a useful tool within its limitations, but you need to understand what those are.
Right.
Okay, so the top two blocks are just record fields, so that you know what this card is based on. Because a lot of times I'll run maybe three, or I'll have three cards. There's one of them on the gun, and the one that's on the gun reflects the conditions the best.
Yep.
But, you know, growing up in Colorado, I still hunt back there a lot, and there can be mornings where it's sub-zero or around zero, and in the afternoon it could be 70. And that's a wide enough swing just in temperature, even though the pressure is pretty well the same at the same altitude, that you need to be able to account for that. So I'll typically have three cards, the extreme low, the extreme high, and then a mid card. And the one that's on the gun is whatever reflects the current conditions. So just below those top two blocks, the third column down, or third row down, is just your headers for the data. So you have your range, your elevation, your wind at 90, your wind at 45, and then SD is spin drift.
Mm-hmm.
So the wind at 90 and the wind at 45, when I pull the data in to make this card, the wind is ran at 90 degrees on Fort. So this is based off the website FortOff.
Yeah.
And the 45 is just a correction off the 90. So I'm not running two different ballistic solutions. I'm just deriving the 45 degree stuff from the 90. And the reason why I run those two is because you can kind of interpolate between them as necessary if it is a quartering value or eighth value wind or whatever it would be. Okay, so the next, I guess, ease of use section is as you go down the range column, what I did was I split each 100-yard block as far as where it's aligned left, right, or center. And that's just to help your eye be able to get to the 100-yard block you're working within. So you range an animal and it's 630. Well, if all of your numbers are in straight alignment, you're having to just go straight down the road. It's not very efficient. But if the 100-yard stuff is all on the right side of the display, the 200-yard is on the left, and the 300 yards in the middle, you can see the staggering of it. It makes it a lot easier for your eye to immediately get to the 600-yard block, and then within that find your 630.
I don't care how you make your dope card. If you do the most basic dope card, but you do that right there is a big nugget of information. Yeah. Very helpful.
And then you'll also see that 200, 400, 600, every other 100 yards is bolded, and the other ones are not. So that gives you another kind of visual separation.
And it looks like the header of each 100-yard block is shaded as well.
That's right. Yep. And then when you move over to the elevation side, kind of a similar story, but instead of setting each value point per the 200 yards. So this whole table is ran with 20-yard intervals. That's mainly based on once you start to get further out there. Those are interval levels that about correlate to 1/10 to 2/10 of a mil changes in your data. So something you can account for.
All tenths matter.
Yeah. But what you see there is each individual 20-yard line has its own cell placement for the solution. So like the 200-yard is negative 0.5 mils. It's all the way to the left. And then the next one, 220 yards, is 0.6. That's in the center. And then 240 yards is 0.7. That's all the way on the right. So they just kind of zigzag, the solutions zigzag back and forth. And that's, again, to help your eye not get confused with everything being in alignment.
Mm-hmm.
When you move to the right of that, you have your 90 mile an hour wind values. And what I do there is with drop, you can see that every single 20-yard interval change, the drop value changes, right? It's unique for every 20 yards. But when you get to wind, that's not the case. Like what you see there is if you look from 180 yards to 240, the wind value is 0.3 mils for all of those distances. And so when I make this card, I combine all of those into one large block because, again, that makes it easier for your eye to just shoot straight across to get the solution instead of leaving each one of those cells to report 0.3. That just, it cleans it up and makes it easier to see. And then you have the same thing with the 45-degree wind. And then spindrift is even less of a rate of change. And so those blocks are really big. And sometimes what I'll do is where the spindrift values are essentially 0, out to, in this case, out to 380, there's no accountable spindrift that you can compensate for within 1/10. And then even out to 700, it's 1/10 beyond that. Sometimes I'll scrap those two columns and use those as just additional data entry stuff if there's other things that I want to account for.
What would an example of that be? You could just take it off and have a skinnier dope card too, right?
Yeah. Or put notes in there.
You could. I might record, the range at which my bullet is reaching the end of its expansion envelope, and additional things you might want to keep in mind. It's just an extra field. And then down at the bottom of the card, you have an arrow jump title block with a value next to it to the right, and then an MPH gun title block with a value to the right of that. So the arrow jump, generally with a 90 degree or 270 degree, right, a straight crosswind angle, the aerodynamic jump value is linear. It's just an angular value. It will be the same. So instead of adding a whole nother column in there and attempting to account for aerodynamic jump, I just report the value of that, and then I add that to or subtract that from the solution based on the wind condition.
Important point here to get, spindrift, aerodynamic jump, and the total come up, or the elevation adjustment. When you run that forward off calculation on Hornady.com, you need to select your fields to parse out not total come up because it'll account for all of those factors.
Mm-hmm.
You want
the no wind trajectory,
elevation, spindrift, and aerodynamic jump separately. So run a no wind trajectory solution so that way you can get all those numbers that are correct. Because if you ran it, it'll give you a total value, and that will hide some of this. So then if you mistakenly did that, you could be compounding an error.
Right. Mm-hmm. So that's what the aerodynamic jump field is there. So again, that's applied to the solution. So if I range the animal, then it's 620 yards. I can quickly see, okay, that's 4 mils, and then I know I have a 10 mile an hour wind from the right. I'm going to take that to 3.9. I'm going to take that off, and then I can shoot to the right of that, and I can see that's a 1 mil windage hold. So pretty quickly get there. And spin drifts to the right of that if I wanted to account for that 1/10. Now the mile an hour gun thing, this is so there's a couple different ways to do it, but the way I do it is I'll set my forward off for usually somewhere between 500 and 600, or one of the two. And then I will note the spindrift value that it reports. So I have the wind set to 0, and it's going to report to you some level of spindrift that's going to be in your windage output, right? Let's say that, at 600, it's telling me I would be 1/10 to the I'd be hitting a tenth to the right. I need to compensate a tenth to the left. I'm going to increase the wind speed with a full value wind and get to where I'm at a 0.5 mil worth of wind being reported. So in this example, this is a 143 ELDX going 2,700 feet a second. At 6.7 miles an hour, that would be the mile an hour of the gun, which equates to a 0.5 mil at 500, 0.4 of a mil at 400, 0.3 at 3, and so on. So you can really quickly, you don't even have to look at the card. You can range at the animals at 620. You know you have a 6 mile an hour gun. You make a wind call and you say it's about 5 miles an hour. That's going to be a touch under a 0.5 mil wind hold at 500 or 0.6 at 6. The farther out you go from there, the more nonlinear it will get.
Yeah, that's one of those things that is very useful within its limitations.
That's right. Yep.
But really helpful and practical to know and apply.
Yeah, that's the same thing as like the speed drop, right? Like
similar concept.
Yeah, you zero your gun somewhere around 300, and then every 100 yards after that is a mil, basically.
Yeah.
And you can even adjust that so that I don't like doing this, but you can zero your turret at 3, right? Where you hit at 3, and then when you're at 4, you dial your mil-based turret to 4, 5 to 5, but then everything inside of 3 is a little jacked up.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's the way you would establish that number manually, but this whole thing is built in Excel to automatically happen. So you take the results off the FortOff website, dump them into this Excel template, and it just does all this for you.
Yep.
So this mile an hour gun, 6.7, is a pretty specific number. That's because I have it programmed to automatically calculate that value based on the data you dump in. So you don't have to go find the number. It does it for you.
Beautiful. And the listener can build a card just like this. Just take some time in Excel.
Yeah. I've been known to spend some time in Excel, I guess.
Yeah. Crash the whole network.
See, now I was a 2007 Microsoft Office specialist, certified. I think Jayden's passed me a long time ago.
I don't have any certifications, though, so.
Well, mine's 20 years old almost.
Does it expire? Got to keep that up?
I imagine they've updated a few things.
Mm-hmm.
And then the very bottom field at the bottom of the card is just a record field, so you can know what that is. So I just, have in there 143 ELDX at 2,700, but I type in more information when I build an actual card. And then on the right side of the template is just the exact same information, but from 700 to 1,280 yards. I'm not going to attempt to harvest an animal at those ranges. Again, I use this for NRL Hunter as well. But if there's a coyote at 1,280, then I'm not going to blow the elk out by shooting at him. I'm going to poke that coyote. So that's why I have it ran out that far. And typically what I'll do is I'll print this thing out, and then I fold it, and then I laminate it. I punch, or you can shipping tape,
Recruit laminate is what we call that.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. And then I just 550 cord it to my scope. So that's what was seen in that video.
Find the latest shirts, hats, hoodies, and accessories that you see here on the podcast and much more at HornadyGear.com.
But a little bit earlier I mentioned at the top right of the first part of the table is a density altitude value.
Yep. So
the reason that I record that is because it is useful.
Because you're a pilot.
I'm not a pilot. I have flown, but I'm not a pilot. It is useful within its limitations. So you'll hear a lot of people, especially when you get into data cards or dope cards, people are talking about DA or density altitude a lot.
Yep.
And density altitude comes from the aircraft world, right? This goes back to like the 1930s and 40s. So they had figured out that depending on the density of the air, that affected how the plane took off. Like if it was really, really hot, you needed a longer runway to be able to get off the ground, stuff like that. That all got boiled down and standardized into what is known as density altitude within the aviation industry. And it's a tool that allows a pilot to essentially quickly establish, based on the amount of lift that they're going to have and the load of the aircraft and all that kind of stuff, if they're good to take off in those conditions or not. That's been adapted into the shooting sports because it's one number that takes care of the air density problem. And the air density problem is a combination of temperature and pressure and humidity. So it's 3 values going into it. Well, it's great when you can take something that's 3 different variables and condense it into just one number, that's way easier to use. So it's very convenient. And it's been widely adopted in the long distance shooting application for that reason. But the problem with density altitude is that to calculate a given density altitude, you have to have those inputs, a temperature and a pressure mainly. So like a Kestrel will tell you that number. But it's getting that number from the temperature that it's measuring and the pressure it's measuring. Now you can go to a completely different one. So I have 2 cards on this sheet of paper we have. So the top card is at a DA of 5,395 feet. And the card down at the bottom is at a DA of 5,197 feet. Essentially identical. They're within 200 feet of each other in density altitude. But if you look at the conditions that resulted in those DAs, the top card was built at 85 degrees at 26.81 inches of mercury. That's going to be around 3,000 feet of altitude. Okay, so let's say summertime, kind of around here, maybe a little bit further west of here. I go out, test this dope card out, my gun's lining up perfectly with everything this has, and then this fall I'm going to go hunt in Wyoming, and I know I'm going to be around 7,000 feet, and it's going to be really cold. It's 5 degrees out. Well, at 5 degrees and 23 inches of mercury, that's going to be around 7,000 feet. That's the exact same DA value. So if the air density is the same between that cold day in Wyoming and the hot day down here in Nebraska, the bullet's going to fly the same way, right? I'm going to hit the exact same place. So the validation I did of my first card when it was warm in Nebraska is going to be the same thing's going to happen in Wyoming. That's not necessarily true.
Wrong again.
Because the air density is a main contributor to where the bullet lands, but another part of it is the change in Mach number that occurs with the change in temperature. And I think we've talked about this maybe before.
That horse is still very much alive. The hefty majority don't quite get that.
Jayden doesn't have a lot of inflection in his voice, So I was waiting for like that "not" or something like that. But just in case people are aware, no, they are not the same.
Yeah.
No.
Appreciate the inflection.
Yes.
Yeah. These are the same "not." No, you will not hit at the same point of impact.
Yeah, and it's not going to be a drastic difference. So if we look at those two, the difference in trajectory, I mean, you can look at the cards and you'll see the rounding differences in the tenths of mils. Mm-hmm. So like at 600 on the Nebraska conditions, it was 3.8 mils. In the Wyoming conditions, it's 3.7. You go to 900, it was 7.2 in Nebraska, 7.0 in Wyoming. There's some rounding that's going on there. The difference in inches, though, of those two, at 700 or 800, it's 2 inches different. At 1,000, it's 5 inches different. Mm. And back to, I think, maybe hit probabilities where we discussed how much error matters.
Yeah.
Again, you're not shooting a laser beam, and that bullet isn't just going to impact 5 inches different, right? You're taking a cone, and you're shifting that cone 5 inches.
Yeah.
And so, can you still hit the animal? Yes.
Maybe.
Can you miss the animal?
Maybe. Possibly.
Right. I think 1,000 is too far, just based on time of flights of bullets and the movement of animals that can happen in that amount of time. I think my opinion, that's a no-go. You shouldn't shoot that far. But this also affects people shooting matches and stuff that are using DA, right?
Real hunter.
At 1,200, there's a 15-inch difference between those two. Nothing changed. Same zero, same velocity, same density altitude, but the trajectories are 15 inches different at 1,200.
Right.
So if you understand that, DA can be used as a valuable tool, but within its limitations. And the way to the way to limit the areas that it doesn't work well is to pick temperatures associated with the pressure to produce the given density altitude to run your chart that are reflective of the environment you're going to be in. And that will help that a lot. Because the more you can minimize the error in your temperature, the more you minimize the Mach number error and the resulting error I just talked about.
Wonderful stuff. I remember DA. That was it. The year was 2013, shooting a 308. Spent a bunch of time making different DA cards. Mm-hmm. Showed up to our first Outlaw PRS match way unprepared, but I had my DA cards.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
And shooting big targets,
Yeah.
You might not observe this because you're shifting that cone. So if you're only shooting 1 or 2 shots at a long range on a big target, you might say DA works fine. But when you really dial down to what's actually occurring, there's an effect there. And what you're going to see is a percentage effect. It's not going to hit you every single time, but you're you're moving those errors around.
Well, your example at 1200, let's say there's a 2 MOA target out there.
Mm-hmm.
You've reduced the percentage of hit probability drastically at that
You
point.
have,
You might hit it. You still might hit it.
Correct, because the top half of your distribution is probably still going to be an impact, but now all of your bottom half is misses.
Yep. And if you shoot 3 shots and you happen to get 3 of the highest shots in your cone of fire,
Yeah, now DA works. Right?
Yep.
DA's proven.
I'm back. Yeah.
So that's why I report the DA value on the card itself. It's because it is a value, but keep it in check with where that number comes from.
I can dig it. That was great. I think the viewer, especially, because I know my main man Preston is going to have wonderful illustrations up on the screen.
They call them graphics in the biz.
Graphics. Oh, in the biz.
But all this is surprising to me is like, this is your kind of like your tertiary, form of getting dope, right?
Yeah, well, it's my primary in NRL Hunter.
Right.
This is how I do
I've seen
it.
that.
Yeah.
But while hunting,
Yeah.
you got a lot of memorization going on, stuff like that before you even get to that.
Yeah. And this is like that other podcast. It's 550 corded to my scope, and then I tuck it into my barrel channel so that it's not like flopping around, stuff like that.
But a lot of effort going into something that
You got to
may
be
or may not
careful,
get
though,
used.
putting things in your barrel channel.
Like rocks?
Yeah.
You know what Jayden could also do is keep his suppressor tight.
I have been known to shoot a loose suppressor.
That was a decade ago.
Was it
You
really?
believe that?
You could also keep your barrel tight.
Well,
Yeah, I have been known to.
my barrel came
You're giving
off.
the internet haters a lot of, a lot of my deficiencies. Here,
I
but
would
don't know if
argue
I-
They didn't even know about
Yeah.
these.
I would argue your barrel doesn't really need to be that tight because mine literally unthreaded when I picked up the gun by the barrel. The weight is on my PRS gun of the whole rig just spun around. Gave her an old hip and then went and cleaned a stage.
Lucky. Yeah.
I've been bit by that a lot.
You got about 1.5 mil circle that could go back to generally with most, like a TL3 or.
Oh, I shot the match of my life.
Yeah.
That particular day.
Got strong hands.
Yeah. Fun fact, just hand tight one once, shoot a group, and then smack it with like a rubber mallet.
Oh, yeah.
And then shoot another group, and you'll have
2 groups.
Yeah.
You can adjust for spin drift that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe that's what we should do.
Yeah.
Windage knob on the stock.
Well, limit cycle y'all on those long shots. I gotta it's
Rubber
like a
mallet.
rubber mallet.
Yeah,
Set the
affect
tune.
those harmonics.
Oh my gosh.
The true tuner.
Yeah, a true tuner. Well, this is obviously devolving, but another important point in doing this is we need to get Miles on a big game hunt and remind him to put in for tags when it's time so he doesn't find out about a month after.
Just a couple of years, I think, since your last one. That odd ad.
Yeah. That's 2 years.
Yeah.
He went on a black bear hunt and got the vid.
Oh, yeah, we did. Well, that
was with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I almost killed your whole family.
Yeah, I need to take you hunting more.
Yep. No animals were killed on that trip.
Yeah, we were
Not
unsuccessful.
to kill your family.
No, I understand. Yeah, but I know you have to clarify for the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to. I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
I know many people listening don't know Miles as well as I do, but he's a very trustworthy individual.
And he's also very
his
satire.
comments don't concern me.
Yeah.
I would say you're about 75% sarcasm.
Well,
It
Maybe
might be
higher.
more than that.
Yeah.
you got him fooled.
Yeah. Your sarcasm was perfectly outlined right before the recording of this podcast when we were unsure if you were at home in bed or coming to the podcast.
Yeah, very ambiguous update on
Yeah.
know, where Miles was.
Yeah. Gosh. All right. Well,
I'll see if I can put that GIF up that he sent.
yeah, I'll say this much for free. The hunting ain't over. Fat lady hasn't saying
I
yet.
mean, we're getting there,
Yeah,
but
we're
it
getting
ain't
there.
over.
But so Preston and I both got mule deer hunts deer hunts.
Deer hunt.
In the sandhills in Nebraska. I might have 2. See what
I hope
did
you
there?
do.
Wiggled my fingers. On the first one is a media event that I'm really looking forward to. Leave for that on Sunday. You're going on a personal hunt with one Ryan Damon, testing out some new R&D products.
Same week.
On that same week. Well, I'd really like to get back from that, as long as I can keep everyone on the home front happy. Steal Jayden, Miles, you're invited too, and we're gonna. I would really love to go back to that one special place out in the Sandhills that has a special place in my heart.
Well, I'll tell you how it is because we're going there first.
Yeah. Well, I hope it's great. I hope you go to Tree Stand Hill and see a plethora of deer.
They might figure it out.
As long as nobody names it that on Onyx, I think we're going to be okay.
I thought it was named.
On
Maybe
your
it's not.
Onyx, you named it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's just how I know it.
I think I shared the pin with
Yeah,
it named.
that's just how I know it.
I digress. Anyways, guys, the hunting ain't over. And for the listener, there's still some late season opportunities. And if you're not going out in the field as prepared as possible, you might find yourself capable of notching a tag. But if you don't have the data, you're not going to be able to make that shot. So definitely take this dope card. And for the NRL Hunter competitor, it's really convenient to have something with a solver in your binoculars.
Right.
Even with a BC solver and all the limitations that has, for big targets at not super far ranges, it's incredibly useful. But something like this dope card here can really make your life easier once you see how thoughtful and clear this card is when you got the stress of the clock or the stress of the hunt coming on, the way the things are colorized, the way that they're moved throughout the cells of, the placement of the text. Really well done.
Thanks.
Yeah, and there's just buttons up top that you can hit, and it'll move it all around. It's great.
Another thing we didn't really talk about, but I think is pretty important, and my eyes got open to this a couple years ago. There's companies out there that make optics.
They do.
That will make you all of that laser engraved onto a turret.
Yep.
That's a fact.
And you can get them at, obviously you're in control of how you set the bracketing for different environments, whether it's you do DA or whatever, but you can order 5 different turrets.
Yeah.
From Loophole or whatever,
yeah,
CDS.
The CDS and Vortex does them, and SIG, and every major optics manufacturer now offers a dial-to turret, where instead of mils or MOA, it's inscribed with the range.
Right. So you still need something for your windage information, but you can knock most of the, especially inside of 600 yards.
Yeah.
The BDC reticles and the CDS style turrets, that kind of stuff is surprisingly effective.
Yep. So I'll be truthful with you guys. I do a lot of media events, and we co-sponsor events, and so I've done a lot of events with Loophole, and I got a good friend over there, their PR guy, Skipper, who obviously isn't listening to the podcast. Done a lot of events with Skipper, and as it turns out, never used a CDS turret. Not because I am against them, but he has convinced me if you want to shoot an animal inside of 200 yards, put a CDS turret on the gun, and the animal will actually walk closer to it.
Oh,
yeah. I've done a lot of media hunts and shoots and stuff with CDS turrets. Never even touched it. And you get it in, and weeks before the hunt, you're dialing everything, and you're at the range, making sure it's going to work for you, and then never had to touch it.
My antelope, the last antelope hunt I did up in South Dakota, I took my PRS rig. I took a 16-pound rifle out antelope hunting because I'm like, antelope, long range, whatever. And I ended up smoking a doe at 180 yards. And it's ended up working. So then I carried a 16-pound rifle all over hell and back for.
Yeah. But we've all been in situations like last year, the first deer I shot rifle season, the particular spot I like to sit is 615 yards away from the stock tank. And for whatever reason, this stock tank has been a rut funnel.
The old rut funnel.
During the opening weekend of rifle season. And 615 yards, I got all the time in the world, pulled out the phone, do all the dope, and I just decided it is so windy, I cannot shoot it. So I had to get closer.
Mm-hmm.
So there's certainly scenarios where you can be as prepared as you want to be, but you're going to have to feel really comfortable because the wind is blowing 25, variable 35.
Oh, yeah. You don't take that shot.
So turned out I got him at 60 yards frontal.
See? My man.
Offhand.
Of course. All right, guys. Well, is there anything else in, managing data in the field that you want to let the listener know, or anything about this dope card, or anything about, managing data in general? I think we've summed it up pretty good. Miles just mentioned it. Max point blank range, BDC reticles, CDS turrets, or other, drop compensated turret. There's a bunch of them. The Ford off on your phone, the Ford off Kestrel, dope cards, screenshot and saved as the background on your phone, binoculars or rangefinders that have dope in there, hard data cards. There's a lot of things you can do, and you should probably be doing a little bit of all of them.
Just make sure you know what they all are and where they fall apart.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe test them. little bit ahead
Yeah.
of time.
Go ahead and do that.
Maybe don't just grab them, throw in a BC
crazy
and a
idea.
velocity and a range and go. Don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't be that guy. Awesome, guys. Well, 'tis Friday. Let's go enjoy a good Friday. I know Jayden's got all kind of plans this afternoon, so
it's going to be busy.
let's wrap it up here. And thanks for coming on the show, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
You bet.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in to this episode all about managing data on your next hunt. And we talked through a bunch of different things that you can do that you should be doing on various fronts, from electronic methods and manual methods, and sometimes how you set up your optic with the zero that can really benefit you in the field on the hunt. We appreciate you listening. We'll catch you on the next one.